Good morning.
Julia didn't send you.
Yeah, I don't have any notes.
Hi there, good morning. Welcome to the second and last day of Animar Barcelona, the first European Animation Convention. Let me introduce to the first panel participants. Ms. Mariona Borrull, journalist, will moderate it. Annemie de Gries, Animation in Europe Treasurer. Ronan Maccabi, Animation Ireland CEO, Petra Tarjan, Ministerial Advisor in the Ministry of Economical Affairs and Employment, Finland, and Ivana Genjo, Animation in Europe Vice Chairman. So the floor is yours. Let's speak about
Let the show begin. Thank you, Mar. Welcome, everyone, and welcome the ones who are watching us at home. I hope you've had breakfast and coffee, and let's see what these incredible participants have to say about animation. So the first round, the first table, is about public-funded animation, either TV or theatrical releases. And I will remember very briefly what they were asked to work on their work groups. I will read the introductions to the discussion topics for the ones who were not here yesterday. So the first one was public financing for animation TV content. And let me read. The European animation television sector is a booming part of the industry and has both talent and capacity to produce excellent series and specials, but the products of the industry are consistently overshadowed in the market. The situation has improved in the last years thanks to some measures: European content quotas, public funds for production and development, tax incentives, tax shelters, etc. But it yet faces several challenges in order to be competitive outside European borders. We need a better integration of the functioning of our multiple audiovisual funds. All right, so based on these introductions, you were asked in the first group, I think it was Ivan and Ronan?
No.
Oh,
Petra.
Ivan and Benedict. Okay. And Petra, okay. You were asked to map the current status of European landscape in terms of existing tools regarding animation, to detect potential problems regarding the compatibility between the different systems in Europe when co-producing between two or more territories, and to brainstorm on potential solutions or improvements which could be applicable in all countries under the EU umbrella. So this is a lot of work. How did it go?
That was myself and Annemie. That was our.
No.
That is very similar.
Yeah. Do you hear me? Yeah. Well, actually, that was a lot of work and really difficult. What we were discussing, I mean, the first conclusion that we got, I think, in the group was that not all film funds in Europe has financing for TV content. So most of them have funds for cinema, but not for television. So that was number one. Number two, those funds who actually have funding for TV, sometimes, and I think this was a sentence that you said, sometimes they work against the industry rather than for the industry. Because sometimes legislation is made thinking on cinema, but not on TV. And therefore, the funds are not so efficient, let's say, as they should. That was the second problem. And the third one was that even if they are successfully, let's say, developed, sometimes they are not compatible with other funds in other territories. And actually, animation, we have to co-produce in order to raise the funding of the projects, and then we can't efficiently co-produce if the film funds are not compatible within each other. So that was kind of the map of the current situation in a nutshell, let's say.
Okay.
Can I add something?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Yes,
I
this is
mean,
my
this is
problem.
your table.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, one more thing that we were discussing for and against, but mainly for, was that there is not enough skills in the whole value chain of producing and distributing animation content or any content, that we have very skillful and talented animation makers, but on the other parts of the value chain there is a lot of problems, and that is also one reason that the success is not as good as it should be.
Yeah. So actually, we need the. I want to say we need to train the film fans, but at some point we need them to understand what are our problems, so that the lines actually work in order to solve them.
Okay.
Yeah, and also other players in the
Yeah.
value chain.
Yeah.
So when you say we need to promote these high-end values and these high-end skills in all the steps of the value chain, how do you do that in a European level? Because every country has their own laws and their own educational system in a kind of way. Is there a way to make a uniform, I don't know, training for funds?
As I've been involved a lot in the audiovisual training through my life, so I would say that the best way to raise and enhance the skills and knowledge is to be more open about the background of the everything that happens in the business. The more we have understanding of the business and the productions and the financing ways and all that, the easier it is for all the individual people to adapt that knowledge and to use it to help their productions and films to achieve their right path in the value chain.
I think our colleagues here agree. Ronan McCabe, an anime. Gris, sorry.
Anime's fine.
Anime. Do you agree?
Yeah, well, I must say.
No, you go ahead. You have the notes.
No, I think we came to actually almost the same conclusion, and I think the difference between series and animation and live, feature-length animation is in that sense the same. It's all about fundings that try to understand what we are doing, what is animation, and that it's not a genre, but that it's a medium. And I think that was the most important thing that came out of our discussion, that it's very important today that that there is more communication with the different European film. Sorry? Okay.
Put the microphone
Okay.
closer.
Oh, I thought it was fixed. Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, the first conclusion actually that we had is that there need to be more communication between the national audiovisual film funds, in between them. And I think Beatrice had an absolute good suggestion that she might try to have that on the program if the EFAT is meeting at the Berlinale very soon now. So I think in the first place, it's more communication, it's a better understanding of what is animation and the importance of it.
And can I add to that as well, Annemie, that we try to concentrate as well on what we're doing well, and a lot of the individual funds are doing things well, but there's not enough communication between them, and maybe there's a little bit of incompatibility between the different funds around Europe. So if we could match those and get people to speak to each other a bit more frequently, I think we could do better things.
Okay. So I read the conclusions coming out from both groups, and I prepared some questions maybe to articulate a debate, but I would like for you guys to talk freely and please answer to each other and please discuss and maybe not fight or argue, but yes, let's have a civilized discussion. So, for example, for Group 2, you saw some opportunities towards, education and educating the people working on the industry and working on funds, such as expanding Erasmus, for example, or having longer internships. How did you reach that conclusion? Is there any example you could put to us?
Well, the example came from, okay, I'll say Estonia, but I hope it's okay. It was something up north.
There.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, the proposal came because of the Erasmus students that are going around Europe nowadays. It's 4 months, Erasmus. And Erasmus is an academical thing, and it's not compatible with the reality in a way. So that's why we said our talent that we need is not just the 4 months, it's much longer. And that's, again, the example that I gave is that we need to understand what is animation, where do we need our needs, and how can we let the people, the education and the funds know what exactly we need. And that was one of the points indeed, that extending trainings would be of a help.
Yeah, I think we felt that some of the training schemes that exist, they're not fit for purpose for the animation industry, because there may be legacy training schemes from live action. One of the contributors sort of said that you get somebody in, and in 4 months' time, they're really only getting up to speed, and then they're gone. Where you would really need 12 months to train somebody. Just to give you an idea, in Ireland we've set up a National Talent Academy for animation that's funded by our Screen agency, and it's an attempt to get industry to solve its own problems. It's to try and look at training, look at what we're doing well, and look at what we could do better. And I think that's what came out of our conversation yesterday. Like we're getting there, but there are still things we could do to improve things.
Yeah. We are also in the middle of a very, very novel way to work, for us to work with the audiovisual work. We have audiovisual industry. We have just collected all the representation of production companies, distributors, financiers, all the international companies that has a representation in Finland, together to discuss a growth deal for the audiovisual sector. So be open and to learn to know each other, and to be able to put on the table all those problems that we see as a problem in having more wealthy business on audiovisual sector. I'm talking about the business because I come from the Ministry of Economy side, and we want to see a healthy business where all the companies can thrive. Of course, there is also the cultural side, the cultural values that has to be taken into account, but that is then the job of the Ministry of Culture and their different bodies and their subsidy help those that can't get enough financing from the market side to help to live in this environment. But to be successful and so that our money would be enough to keep the cultural side as versatile as it should be, that means that the business side has to be healthy on the bottom. And that's the kind of an order in which we want to put the decisions in the business, that first we have the healthy business, and then the cultural money is used to help exactly those areas where it's needed, and not to keep the whole business alive. And that is also something that I think we should also be able to talk on European level and have more about the discussion about it, how to make the whole ecosystem of all the animation business and audiovisual business to thrive on European level. And that needs the harmonization of some of the rules, for example, for the public funding, but it also needs the involvement of the market side and the market investors. And that's why I should have liked to see that also the market investors would have been here to tell their side how they see that the whole ecosystem will thrive in the future, because it's important for them too. Okay, sorry. Hope you heard something.
Actually, the training on European level, that was also something that aroused in the group, because we were saying that you cannot educate someone to be a producer on a European level, because the systems are so different that whenever you have someone studying how to become a producer, you know how to become a producer in Spain, in France, in Germany, but the system is different. And there's no way that you can actually train someone. There's no training program. And the only way to do that is through experience, through actually putting this someone into the market and actually live the experience on how to do that. And so I think it was Olde from Denmark who said that, like, we should have these training programs together to this life experience, and then maybe we should see how to incorporate this talent into the companies and maybe help these positions to become, and then we can actually foster the knowledge. Because it's impossible to have it on a theoretical level.
Yeah, and one more thing. On top of the education, there is not much research on this area. I sit in the Horizon program, which is a European research program, and in the Pillar 2, which is about culture and democracy and social coherence, and on the cultural side there is I think a huge lack of common research on the audiovisual side, on all creative industries. There is very little of research how the whole ecosystem should face, for example, the big change in the market and everything else that's happening.
Do you mind, Mariana, if
please,
I ask
please.
you a question? Yeah,
I mean,
we'd keep it informal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I just ask you? You're from the economic side, you know, and it may be helpful to producers. Like, how do you measure success in the animation industry? What's your metric?
I must warn you that I'm trained as a producer.
Okay.
And I was working 20 years as a producer before I went to the ministry. And we measure success by reaching all the values that the community or the society has for sustainable growth. And sustainable growth is about not only about economical growth, it's about environmental sustainability and also about social sustainability. All these factors has to be met that it's called a success. But we don't have any metrics for that yet, and there actually was yesterday a European conference I was not able to listen to about how they have developed these metrics to measure these things, but it's on its way.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
We'll look forward to it.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead with one of the most striking ideas I read in Group 2 conclusions. That was, yeah, that's it. One of the main challenges you found in regards to more strong, unified crop production future was the number of different codes and, and budget templates, between countries. Could you expand on that? Because we talked about it yesterday evening, and I found it really striking. It was so diverse.
It was a really interesting dinner conversation, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Accounting codes for animation. Yeah, it came up yesterday that there are different styles of budgeting, and in sort of outside Europe maybe it's above the line and below the line costs. And then within Europe there are different variations on how we do budgeting, and we just thought it would be a simple win would be that we would agree a common template for budgeting and common codes for the various production lines. So it's a simple ask, but I don't know how easy it will be to implement.
Yeah. In the thoughts, how can we better work together, and how can we work towards better films in the end? There were some steps to take, and communication was a big thing, and part of that communication was how can we better communicate on the figure side as well. And it seems that is, we can want one simple budget, but on politic level it's not that simple. Yeah. So we wouldn't be producers if we wouldn't think about other things. And then so that is a thought that has been discussed earlier than yesterday. And Karen from WAF said that there has been some discussions that why not using internal codes, internal European codes, even if we present by country another template, that at least animation in an animator in every country would have the code 001, or the in-betweeners 002, well, etc., etc. So, but these are simple communication tools that can be improved, but for that, I think the funds must gather and must discuss it, and must discuss especially animation. What is special to animation, and how can we improve the collaboration?
Yeah. But it is not only to harmonize the codes or the kind of expenditure, but also to harmonize the eligible expenditure, because not all expenditures are accepted in the same way in the different territories. Someone in our group said, I don't remember who was it, but that in some country, the producer fee was not an eligible expenditure for the fund. So, and it's kind of crazy, because it's like, hey, producers, we also need a salary to live. So it's like, can we harmonize this, please, all over Europe? So we need to actually get into some really basic agreements to actually be able to work together.
Yeah, we don't have enough tools to try to change things, because we don't have enough information what we have at the moment. So there should be first some research and survey, and then much more networking and cooperation between different bodies and all the public bodies and all the the companies and their representatives to be able to discuss that, how to get further with these changes. But there's a huge need for change at the moment.
So you know what to do, Animar edition number 2. you know who to gather and what to discuss about. Group 1 has reached a quite shocking conclusion here. That is, I quote, quote unquote, public funding often works against the business. So, for example, requirements to access money do not meet the reality of the industry. But why is that?
I can answer that, because that was probably what I also was taking up. But it's because of the lack of understanding of the business, at least from my point of view, because I work with the legislation for different funding instruments. So I can see that when the legislation is done, how funding is structured. So there is not enough understanding and how the business works. And then also, quite often when we think about public funding, we forget that there really is a market that affects, that this is not only about public funding, but this is very much about an actual functioning and existing market first. And we have to adapt the public funding so that it works together with the market, not against it. That's
okay. Okay. Group 2 mentioned this connection between the animation industry and the political sphere. Did you discuss on how to build a constructive discussion with politicians that actually helps the industry?
No. We don't have a magical tool for that. No, we are all on the same level, and I think, the group that we had yesterday, if it was film bodies or not, we all kind of want to have a better communication. We all want to go on a next level, but in the end, it's the politicians that are deciding whether something is possible or not. So that's why we think it is really important that, and in that, that there is the communication. Again, it's communication, that we take those politicians with us to understand what we are doing. What is animation? It's not just a genre, it's a medium. So that we continue telling them that it's not something little for children there somewhere. It's huge, it's a market. There's a lot of money going on in what we are doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, too, as well, in terms of some of the stuff that Ivan and Mitra mentioned, in terms of politics, sometimes initiatives are brought in that seem good. And I think Martin Dawson, I don't know if Martin is still here, but he mentioned yesterday the European Investment Fund. And that's a really good initiative. Mm-hmm. But, in each individual country, there has to be a bank or a financial intermediary who can manage that and draw down the funds. And in some of the smaller territories, that's just not available. So again, it's it's something that sounds good on paper, and yet we're not sophisticated enough to actually draw that down. So to make sure that we can feed back to politicians about things like that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Agree with that.
Yeah.
Very much.
And both groups have reached the conclusion that there are incompatibilities between specific European funds. I mean, funds you can apply to. Is there, if you apply to this fund, you cannot apply to that other, or something like that? You're referring to this?
Sometimes it's more on the conditions on how to do it. Like if all film funds require some territoriality expenditure and nationalities on some key positions that are always the same and are really restrictive, then it's really difficult to actually match the conditions of both. unless you duplicate positions or you kind of fine-tune the way to actually work on that. So if there is more flexibility in the way the fund is thought, then we can actually do better projects. And not only focusing on production, which was also something that appeared in our group, we not only need to focus on production, but also on development and on distribution. So we also need much more cooperation in these two parts of the value chain, because these are basic in order to create, to strengthen, let's say, the production companies, especially in development, because animation needs lots of money to develop the products. And so this is also where we need much more financing tools and much more matchmaking tools that actually they are not there.
Yeah, maybe I can just add that the fact that film commission, film bodies need, or by country you need to cooperate more or better, is that the more and more we have to cooperate, especially in feature-length animation film, whereas like about 5 to 10 years ago, you could raise money for a feature-length animation film of about 10 million euros. You could raise it with 3 countries. Today, it's absolutely not feasible anymore. You need at least 5, even 6 countries to raise that same money. The budgets has grown enormously, especially with inflation and that nowadays, but they have grown. The supports haven't grown at all, which means that you need more countries together. But we now feel there is a limit. So it is, we will need to sit down and really think about how can we cooperate in Europe, how we can, all those film bodies, keep their own being and how they are, and keep working on the local effects, but still looking into Europe. The better we are in our own region, the better we will be in Europe. But we need to have that focus, that European focus, because otherwise we won't be able to work.
I think too as well, Mariana, we talked about diminishing returns. So there was a bit of conversation that getting into a co-production is like a relationship, you know.
Yes.
And you know, most of us find it difficult enough with one partner, but you know, with 2 or 3 and 4, it just becomes impossible. It's like this, you know, polygamous relationship that you just can't manage everything. So that was one aspect of it, but because of the pressure on budgets, we have to have multiple partners. And then the other thing as well, in relation to some of the regional funds, there was a little bit of talk about the I suppose the obligation to spend X times the amount of money that you're given. So like if it's twice the money or 4 times the money or 8 times the money. So if you get a grant for, you know, 100,000, that you have to spend 800,000 in the region or 600,000. And that then works against co-production as well, because you then don't have any budget left to spend somewhere else.
Yeah.
And why is that? I mean, I'm a complete stranger to animation co-production tendencies, but why should you like spend 8 times the money you're given?
Well, if I can, it's it's of course not the basic rule. The basic rule is that you have to spend 100% in your own region. The thing is that if you're speaking about economical effects of some funds, then they look at your application and they support the applications that are performing the best within the idea of giving a push to the economical effects of what you're doing. So in that perspective, it's absolutely normal what they are asking. It's just that, yeah, it's very difficult competition. That's why I'm saying it's, you know, we can discuss this in 2 hours, but we cannot find solutions in 2 hours. It's much more complicated than that.
Animar 3rd edition, you know what to do.
Yeah, all these incentives in Europe, they have different kind of rules and also the reasons why they've been set up, and there are national incentives and there are regional incentives. Some are compatible, some are not. This is very much the question of how well the legislation or the lawmakers and the policy side understands the business and what are the aims of the financing. We had a long discussion in Finland between the Ministry of Culture and Ministry of Economics of the targets of the cash rebate system we have set up, and it has worked well because we work together and we work also openly together with the audiovisual business and all the actors that are involved. So these examples should be more open and there should be more discussion between the, also the administration, and then also the third party is then the politicians who in the end make the decisions, but also the preparation of the legislation or the rules should be much more into harmony. I have now for the last 12 months worked quite closely with Sweden and their making the rules for their incentive, and that has been also a very, very fruitful discussion because it has shown that how much it can give to both sides if we talk over the borders about the rules, and that is something that is very much missing in Europe on this sector. We have a lot of individual little actions here and there, but to have a more open and more covering the European, the whole European sector, that kind of a discussion is still missing. And as we have been in this discussion here, it's not only about the incentives, it's also a lot of other issues, the education and other funding systems and all that. It all needs much more harmonization.
It's the whole ecosystem. So the public funds, the tax incentives, the training, the legislation, everything needs to be harmonized. Otherwise, if one of the parts of the ecosystem doesn't work, the whole ecosystem will not actually function.
In that sense, it was Group 1, You mentioned Eastern Europe. You talked about the situation there with people coming from Eastern Europe, I assume. What's the situation actually nowadays?
The feeling was that the Eastern European territories didn't feel represented somehow in the European policy. Like all the cases, all the schemes that appear on European level, they are not actually adapted to the real situation, and that there were actually two speed kind of areas. And that's a problem. I mean, if they feel that they are not represented, this is a problem that we need to also tackle at some point. Well, not us maybe, but policymakers should take into account. And I don't know if you had the same feeling in your
well,
group.
we had a discussion with regards to who is the lead producer, and that the lead producer is often linked to the percentage that you can keep as a producer in a feature-length movie.
Retention of IP, that was it.
And that for the former Eastern European countries, it is impossible to keep 51% of the rights with regard to the financing, because they're much lower than in our regions. I'm from Belgium. That's why I say our regions are.
Side note.
So that there must, we have to think about what does it mean to be main producer, and that that it's not really linked to a percentage that you can keep in rights, but that who is the initiator and how can we value the different financing level that you bring to
But this is also a problem here in Spain. It's not only in Eastern European. So whenever you match two countries which have very different power in terms of financing, and you create this unbalanced relationship, we need to actually balance that, because otherwise it can be the case that the leading producer, the one that initiates the project, ends up being the minority one in the co-production. And so we need to also find some mechanisms so that we compensate that.
It was, on a practical level, it was the case that some of our Eastern European colleagues were saying yesterday that it's almost a disadvantage to them that they're a lower cost animation sector, because they get hammered then on the right side. So if they can do it cheaper, it dilutes their share of the rights. Now it is difficult to come up with a different method of sharing the rights, but it's something that we're going to have to look at.
Yeah, definitely. It looks like yes. Actually, talking about disadvantages on the market, Group 2 talked about short films. Do you think, for example, shorts lack a market in comparison to features? And as I understood from talking to you, Ronan, last evening, the situation in the TV series is quite the opposite, right?
Yeah.
So how should we, look at this subject nowadays here, and how would it be productive to talk about this kind of, differences? Or
I think when we talked about short films, there was a sort of a conversation last night and at our panel that we're meant to be in an environment now where people have shorter attention spans. And they like snackable content. They like content that they can look at on their phones when they're traveling. So surely that should be a good thing for shorts. And we felt it was maybe incumbent on us as producers to try and, I suppose, educate the market. The pressure's on us as well. And it was a sort of a conversation. We can't force people to watch our content, but we have to let them know that it's out there. And there was a bit of talk about marketing in particular, and that maybe, and again some of our Eastern European colleagues were saying this, that maybe we need to come up with a task force and try and, I suppose, become more sophisticated in our marketing to let people know that the content exists. And I think sometimes shorts operate in a parallel universe where they're only really seen at festivals, and people don't actually get to see them, commercially, and that's probably on us to try and come up with a solution for that as well.
Yeah, because it is existing, and what is special with animation and short is that, in comparison to live action, is that short is really a business in animation. It's a genre within the medium animation. So, with a lot of attention, and personally, I produce at least 3 a year, and they are out there. They are existing on platforms, but we need support. We need also from media, from Europe. Shorts are not enough supported, and I think it should be really better. It's not a business card from a young guy who wants to do features or series. It is a genre, and we should evaluate that, especially nowadays that we all watch on phones. And
absolutely. And on the other hand, TV shows are actually blooming, or is it so?
What do you mean improving? It's quite subjective.
Of course. I mean, TV shows are produced more and more each day. Yes. Here in Spain in 2012, there were 288 television shows, either animation or live action, and now it's 564 television shows in December 2021. So it's like we are producing more content each day. shouldn't this be a good news for animation?
We are. For instance, now in Spain we have if I'm not wrong, we have from 25 to 30 animation series in progress at some point, in development, production, post-production, whatever. The point is, are all of those shows being actually broadcasted in a proper way? Are they being exported in a proper way? Do we have the capacity to get out of the original broadcaster who commissions that and make this content available throughout Europe and throughout the world? And the question is not so much. And that's because, again, in addition to the production support, we also need support on the distribution and on the marketing and on sales. And this support can be either financially or it can be also training, as we were saying. We need to also train producers in financing skills, in business planning, in all these kind of soft skills that we also need in order to make companies, that's a proper business, let's say, and not only funding. So this is, again, the ecosystem needs to run in all its sphere.
All right.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. I would like to highlight two propositions Work One made and came out with, because I think they're concrete solutions and specific solutions that are, I don't know if feasible because I'm not an expert, but are highlightable. So the thing is, you said cash flow is a shared concern as it puts a lot of pressure on producers and increases the financial expenses of projects. And you proposed, number one, create one general rule for broadcasters to pay before. And number two, create financial tools to access private money with fewer costs. The room agrees with you, I guess.
I guess the whole room agrees. Can we improve the cash flowing systems, please? So why do we need to wait for 5 years until we get our money in order to do the show? And then we have to pay for heavy banking interest that we cannot afford. So if we improve the cash flowing system, everything will be easier for us. So yeah, either we get a general rule where everyone has to pay in different installments before, or we improve the system to access the financing.
For theatrical releases, is it the same, or maybe the urgency is lesser as, I don't know, the times are different?
No, it is the same in a way. The time is, of course, maybe a bit shorter, but it takes a long time to make a feature as well. And you do not get the money up front neither. And maybe a bit more because you're not so depending on broadcasters, and that the funds are always paying you in different installments. But in the end, you have to wait upon your last installment until everything is done. And if you're in a co-production where you are the first, for example, to do some work, then you have to wait until the end, and it can take 2 or 3 years. You have to wait until the end, until everyone has made his accounting, and then you have to wait for the last installment from all your film buddies, and then you're like, okay, I'm like 2 years waiting to end the project. And you have to go to a bank, of course. And that costs a lot of money.
Yeah. Actually, Group 2 proposed ring fencing animation funding. How would you do that? I mean, what do you mean about ring fencing?
I think there was talk, in some of the territories where animation funding is just out of a general pot, as opposed to separate funding for animation, and I think that's where that came from. It's not the situation in every territory, but it's certainly the situation in some territories. Mm-hmm. And in terms of the cash flow, I understand why as producers we have to hit certain marks before you get a certain amount of money when you've done your scripts and you've done your animatics. Was the conversation around making that the same right across Europe, or everybody just paying the money up front? What was yeah, I mean,
No.
that would be great, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, no, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to happen, but one of the suggestions was to make a general rule from European level, let's say, where all broadcasters or all, let's say, agents were using the same, more or less, calendar for payments. The point is not waiting until we have to deliver the show to have 100% of the financing, but have access to part of the financing in between.
Okay.
But I don't guess general rule is kind of crazy.
And also one thing is to discuss what kind of rights, for example, the public broadcasters get. Are they allowed to take all the rights against what they pay, or do they just get, for example, a 7-year window for the rights, or 3 years?
Actually, this is the discussion of the next panel right now.
Okay, yeah, but that's also an important thing. There's very many different kind of ways to handle that question in different European countries.
Okay. I would like to ask you if you want to add anything to what we've said to the moment, because as we're concluding these work groups, you've been actually in person. I would like to, ask you if I'm leaving something, if you want to emphasize something, if you want to ask something to your audience, if the audience wants to ask something to them. So if you have something on in the sleeve, please don't hesitate.
Well, I can maybe just add that we have been talking about communication on producers level, but there is indeed, within the communication, we have also talked about the communication towards our public, and that part also should be taken into account from in the beginning that you're working on your feature-length movie until it's there, and it's not with the peanuts that we have today that we can do that communication.
Are you talking about PA, marketing? Okay, yeah, of course.
I'd like to sort of double down on that. I think we sometimes, the conversation yesterday was around, we sometimes feel our job is done when we've delivered and we get our final payment. And maybe there's not enough of an emphasis on using what we have then and marketing that. So there was a good bit of talk about P&A, that we really need to spend more money and a bit more time and being more sophisticated in terms of our marketing plans. Now, obviously that takes money, where that comes from is another discussion, but that we have this content and we need to market it more rigorously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any question? Something you'd like to add? If not, I have a question. Actually, I have two, because both of the groups worked on the idea of language. And, both of you have considered language when talking about co-producing. So how is language a weakness and a strength at the same time? For example, group 2 had it on their board. They had it as a weakness and as a strength. And how can we work with that?
The weakness is that it costs a lot to translate. The strength is for animation, especially for children, is that wherever you go, you will have a local film. So it's not the same with live action, where you have subtitles and where you will always have that other language. But in animation, you work always with a local product in the end. But it costs a lot of money.
Yeah, I suppose I'm a bit sensitive to this as a native English speaker. I have to be careful and diplomatic. And actually, everybody told me that they could understand me, which was even better, right, in English. But one thing that we talked about was that projects sometimes needed to be developed in English, and the original lip sync in a project should be in English, and then sort of dubbed into our other languages, because that helped for export. Now that was tiny bit controversial, but you know that English would become dominant in Europe. But we did say like our languages are a positive and a negative, but yeah, it was that sort of lip sync thing was a big issue.
Of course.
And it's also, in terms of co-producing, you can ask yourself, everyone now has to apply in his own language, and that's a lot of money that you put in translations. Do we want to keep that for the content and for the visuals and for the creativity, or do you want to use that for your application? Of course, that's a very difficult question that we use, but that's Europe. Europe is very diverse, that's his strength, but in the same time, it can be heavy to handle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And especially talking about public organizations that, I don't know, I mean, I imagine should promote the culture and the expression of each, yeah, wow, yeah, that's a tacky subject, absolutely. So is there any, okay, there's a question.
Hi, I think the key issue that you have noticed is that the requests for national, regional, or local expenses is going too far. Taking the example of France, when we started regional funding, all regions said we will give a grant that will amount 25% of the local expenses. But because there were a lot of applications, they went down to 20%. 15%, and now in Nouvelle-Aquitaine they are around 10%. And this doesn't ease the co-production, of course. And the problem is that there is no rationale behind this calculation, especially because they compare to live action. But live action is not the same. Live action has only one place of shooting, and the local expenses are not of the same quality, if I may say that. You send a crew to shoot a live action show, and then the crew gets out. Whereas in animation, you have people that decide to move, to live somewhere, set up there, have families, expense, etc., etc. So this is really, for me, key to the pedagogy that we need to have with the film funds, and one of the conclusions that you have is we need to have a dialogue, a constructive and consistent dialogue with EFAD to make them aware of this problem and try to find the right ratio between the grant and the local expenses. Otherwise, it won't make sense and we won't be able to co-produce anymore. Yeah. This is what I keep in mind as the main issue. And also, I think that our Finnish friend had an idea.
Thank you, Philippe.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I had a thank you for inspiring some of the inspiring discussions here. And in my group, I was the one who was bothering everyone, telling that what if we had this pan-European P&A fund, because this is something what we deserve, and it would be more fair competition with US features, because I believe that we made good features here, but we always lose the competition, and I mean on big level, so on pan-European level. And there are many reasons why I should say that this won't work. But like I would like to challenge us as an animation in Europe that we should try to start to build a P&A fund, which is combination of subsidy and private money. And I'm so happy that Petra here from Right Ministry, because it's trade and industry, is here. And I kind of like pitch my idea first idea to her, and she got interested in. So what I'm going to do in Finland will continue with Petra, well, start to discuss. And then I contact private money investors. And if they think that there is something on that, so then I'll talk with you guys in Animation Europe, and then together we should pitch to Eurimages and or creative media this, and start to build P&A fund on pan-European level. Because this is art for masses. We need audience, especially like features. We need audience for that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Pedri, wasn't the issue there that when we do that on a national level, the amounts of funding just aren't enough to make an impact in the market, whereas if we did it on a pan-European level, we could get bigger funds and make a bigger impact.
Ole here was in Group 1, and I think Petri's suggestion is very great with the European P&A Fund. I have a couple of ideas myself about a discussion we could also take, because it sounds to me like we're focusing a lot of the discussion on bringing more money, more possibilities, etc., but we are avoiding one discussion which is very important, is do we actually make the right amount of content in Europe? Because currently there's 1,500 feature films and 700 TV series. They have the one thing in common, which they're all underfinanced and underwatched. Maybe we could just make a little bit less content, and the content we make significantly better, is one suggestion I also have.
That did come up in Working Group 2.
Yeah.
We talked about that, that projects maybe go to market underdeveloped, and that we maybe need to spend some more time developing script writing talent and other talent, and that projects only come to market when they're ready.
Yeah, there's always this discussion, like, do we split the money in, I think, more projects, less finance, or less projects, better finance? And obviously we want better finance projects, but, maybe as much as possible.
Yeah,
as many
but
as possible.
I understand what he says. Aren't there too many films? And this is not a question for animation, this is also a question for live action.
Yes.
I think that we in Europe have too many films, there are not enough screens.
Yeah.
I have cinemas, I know what it is just to have too many films, because you don't give the possibility to the films to really exist, and that's another issue. But indeed, if we develop longer and better, then I think that some of the films will never be made as well, because when you're developed longer, then on a certain moment you will see that it's no use to have it produced.
That's
one of our sorry.
One
of the people in our group told us that it took 12 years to develop one of their projects. So that's maybe at the far end of the development side, but there's definitely room for improvement.
Well, I think that's a very interesting topic to end our discussion, our panel. Thank you so much for having participated in this Congress, and thank you for listening. We are now proceeding to panel 2. I don't know if immediately, or we're having a break, or is it right ahead? Okay,
thank you.
So
Thanks,
thank you, people.
That's great. Really good stuff there. Yeah, all for it,
I guess.
Nice to meet you as well.
Yeah.
Sorry, we just didn't have time after the start there. I was saying that we were sitting down.
Yeah, exactly. Hi there. Please take seat.
I wish we had some printouts.
Yes.
Find your notes.
Now, the second panel, also moderated by Ms. Mariona Borrul, we will have to Ms. Cristina Morales, Deputy General Director for Audiovisual Regulation from Spain, Philippe Alessandri, Animation in Europe Chairman, Dirk Beinhol, Animation in Europe Vice Chairman, and Mathilde Fiquet, CEPI General Secretary. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for staying. So yeah, we're accompanied by representatives of Group 3 and 4, who are in charge of discussing private financing for television and for theatrical releases. So I will read again the introduction for each of the work groups, so we're on the same page here. Let me see. On Group 3, which was about animation TV content. So, it says, the expansion of the US streamers across Europe has created new opportunities for the European animation, but certainly not on the same level than for the European live-action fiction, and European studios lose the ownership of their IPs. European broadcasters, public and private networks alike, are still acquiring animation programs, but the level of license fees make the financing of original content very challenging. And the territoriality regulation remains a major threat for the industry, as we've discussed on the previous panel. 30 years after Television Without Frontiers, the AMS directive is a first step to create a viable playing field for the European animation, but will have to be strengthened to address the serious challenges faced by producers and distributors. Okay, so Philippe, you were in Group 3?
Yes.
Okay, Cristina, you were in Group 3 as well. Okay, so how did it go?
It was passionating because I don't know what you thought, but I found it passionating because in our group we had 3 types of participants. For the first time ever, 1/3 of the participants were TV broadcasters. I have to say public broadcasters, but TV broadcasters. 1/3 were producers, and 1/3 were either a governmental institution or association supporting the industry. So we had really diverse point of view, and we spent a lot of time establishing a diagnostic on the current situation. But we achieved to agree on a few important things that are not new for you, but it was important for us that the broadcasters will acknowledge the situation, that producers struggle to raise the financing of animation series for kids because in most of the countries in Europe, the license fees are pretty low or very low. And that is because the budget allocated to animation series is also very low in comparison to the budget allocated to adult programming. What I'm saying is not what I feel, it's what I've heard from, for example, Suzanne. Thank you, Suzanne, from RTE, from being transparent with us, saying that only 3% of RTE's budget is allocated to animation. This is not the rate of the kids' demographic in Ireland. In France, which is a lucky country, 7% of France television funding goes towards animation, but kids 4 to 14 are 15% of the population. So this was really important that we all acknowledge that, and therefore we feel that the public financing is essential to the production of kids programming. We also feel that it is important that the producer retain the property, and thanks to all the 6 public broadcasters who were with us, who said, yes, this is fair, this is right. The IP shall be retained mainly by the producers because it's endorsing all the risk to make this happen. Now, when we add a disagreement, we have to face it. This is on the rights. Public broadcasters expressed very clearly that they need to have rights in exchange to the money, public money, that they invest into our series. And that sometimes they need to have up to 10 years rights. This came from Martin, Denmark, when he said that when I have to pay for half of the production budget, I want 10 years in return. Yago also from RTVE said that. And we understand that. What is difficult for us as producers is when the financing is not on a high level, depending on the countries, of course, and that still we are asked to give 10 years. So I think we agree that at least each country each broadcaster shall proportionate the rights they ask to the financing they can invest. So, for example, the 10 years rule shall not apply to everything. It shall apply to high investment, to co-production, but maybe not to pre-buy. And then it seems that there is a standard for acquisition and pre-buy, which is more in 3 years, 4 years term. Having said that, I want to stress that depending on the country, there is a lot of differences of the long term. For example, Suzanne told us at RTE that the long term that she asks for in a co-production is 5 years, whereas DR or RTVE ask for 10 years. Or ZDF, they were not there, but I can tell you it's 7 years. So there is still a large scope from 1 to 2, and these raise question about the best practices on the market. That was a diagnostic of the market. And okay, talking also about the US streamers, because although they were known in the room, we talked about that. And we have a situation now where the US streamers are investing a lot in Europe because there is a huge competition. But Christian Davin from Cartoon pointed out that this situation will have a short term. In years to come, probably the platform which have to be rational, economically speaking, will have to reduce their investment in original creation. Also something that we notice in every country in Europe, that the investment of the US streamers is much bigger for live action, primetime drama, than for kids animation. Why that? It's because to gain subscribers, US streamers need primetime drama fiction, whereas they know that kids animation travel well across boundaries, and then they, of course, the acquisition center is based in Los Angeles, sometimes in London, but never in each country, which is not the situation in fiction, where in each major territory in Europe, they have an acquisition manager who is a national person. So we have this problem of investment in animation from the streamers, and also we have another problem with them, which is not new to you, which is to the contrary of European public broadcasters who are fair enough to recognize that the IP shall be with the producer. The streamers do not want to share the IP with a producer. I'm talking about sharing because we have to be honest and say that the streamers invest much more money in a show than each individual public or commercial broadcaster in Europe, but still it would make sense, it will be fair that the streamer, the US streamers, will share the rights with the producers. It's not only about allowing the producers to keep some rights because they need catalog revenues year after year to finance their development into new projects. But it's a European political issue that we need to retain IP. What will be the next Peppa Pig, the next Tintin, Asterix, the next Pocoyo, the next Wings, if all the streamers retain all the IP? We will have no IP to drive merchandising business from if we leave all the rights to the US streamers. So these are the diagnostic that we did on the market. And regarding the recommendation, I will leave to Christina because, and this will be not surprising to you, most of the recommendation we have are on the legal side, and I've got an expert on my side.
Thank you.
Thank you, Philippe. Well, as Philippe has said, we had a very interesting debate in our working group. I suggest, Mark, that for the next year, commercial broadcasters should be invited so that the debate becomes more fruitful, because I think it's a very interesting point of view, or even VOD providers, because there are different business models, and it could be very, very interesting. So one thing we pointed out in the working group is the need for data. So for a better regulation and for a better design of public policies, we regulators need data, and data is failing right now. We acknowledge that the European Commission is right now very busy with several reports regarding the audiovisual sector in Europe. So we wait for those reports and data and see if they point out how is the European ecosystem right now. And then we talked about the challenge that European governments are facing in the 2 or 3 following years regarding the revision of the Audiovisual Media Services Directive. And in this regard, the main challenge would be the obligation to promote European works. And in this regard, what will be considered as European? So therefore, we had this dialogue to see if UK-produced audiovisual works should be considered as European or not, since the UK decided not to belong to the EU anymore. So that's one of the main points that we debated yesterday. So that would be a main challenge for us.
Wow. All right. I think we can expand on that, or I don't know if there's any immediate answer from any UK citizen in the room. Maybe that would be interesting as well.
But I suppose just from an Irish perspective, if UK were removed from the pot, it would have a huge implication for our industry. You know, like it or not, we're very conjoined just in terms of our workflows. So it is just something that we would consider. So we're kind of very torn. Obviously, we're European, but just a huge amount of our output and work is still very much tied to the UK.
Yeah, and Animation Ireland, we represent studios on the whole island of Ireland, so they're in 2 jurisdictions, so some in the Republic and some in Northern Ireland, which is obviously part of the United Kingdom.
I didn't know that. How difficult, how difficult it will be for you. I won't answer your comments because I can't, your problem, but I will answer Suzanne. Of course, let me give you my own opinion. It's only fair to think that the European quota should be an EU quota. And it's not against the UK at all. I don't understand why Moldavia, Russia are part of these quota content, but of course there will be a transitional period. We're talking about 3 to 5 years. I mean, we understand that broadcasters and platforms who have acquired catalog with UK content will need time to acquire from. But ultimately, Ireland will be a country that will benefit from that, for sure. Other regulatory proposals that we had, I think it's
the definition of independent producer.
Yes.
Yeah, that was the definition of independent producer would be also a challenge so that right now the Audiovisual Media Services Directive has no definition of independent producer. So we will have to see if in the next revision it should include a definition of what an independent producer is considered at a European level. So I believe that the best option could be to have a harmonization all over Europe. That would be the best to get a European focus. No? On the first panel, I have heard several times cooperation, collaboration within the EU and European focus. So we cannot have a European focus if we do not have harmonization rules. So therefore, it's very important that we all make a debate within the European Commission at a European level. So that's the main point.
Absolutely, knowing that we all remember the successful decision from Europe Creative Media years ago. I recall that when I started in the business, every public broadcaster will acquire the rights for 30 years. RAI, for example, acquired the rights for 30 years. Then Europe Creative Media decided that their grant will be exclusively reserved to those series produced, acquired by broadcasters with a maximum of 7 years or 10 years in the case of a co-production. And suddenly, all TV broadcasters aligned on this term. So there is a successful track record that we can, based on the evolution of regulation of.
All right. So Group 4, we have here two representatives, Mathilde Fiquet and Dirk Beinhardt. Did I say it right?
Beinhold.
Okay, sorry. What were the main conclusions you arrived at, or do you have any previous idea you would like to expose and to talk about?
Absolutely. We have quite a lot. We had a beautiful group of, I think, 15 people roundabout from 9 different countries. And we discussed how more market financing can be triggered for feature films. And of course, that also included a bit of what was discussed in the previous panel, which is public funding for feature films. And well, first of all, actually, I would like to thank the lovely hosts here in Spain to make this possible, because look at this amazing roof. It's so beautiful. This location is so amazing. The city is so inspiring. Thank you. Okay, to come back to the main issues. The good news. Let's start with the good news. The good news is that animated European feature films are champions among all European films. So we're extremely successful, actually. Roughly 1/3 of cinema admissions of animated feature films happens in their own countries of origin. About 1/3, and this is of course an average only, happens within the EU, outside the originating countries, the producing countries, and 1/3 outside the EU. So it's amazing. Animation traveled so well, like no other feature films. I can say for Germany, for example, our animated feature films create more than half the foreign sales, the overall export of all German films. And we have more than 100 German films and only 5 to 8 animated films. So it shows you how successful it is. So how can we be more successful? One thing we noticed is that, and media already picked up on that, Creative Europe, we need more international co-development, more funding for development, and we need stronger distribution because there are some beautiful films that don't really get enough exposure. So these are definitely two main issues that we have to tackle over the next years, and that we felt in our groups local or national bodies also need to tackle, and not just Media Creative Europe, which already heard that call. With that in mind, how can we trigger more international financing? I give you the floor.
Right, so it's quite right that it was a difficult conversation because we kept going back and forth between the public funding, but trying to always go back to the market financing, which was the focus of our discussion. I think what we really came out of the conversation yesterday is that our industry is still perceived as highly risky, so it's not necessarily very appealing for financiers. So it really was about how can we incentivize that private investment. So we looked into the Media Invest program. We also talked about the guarantee facilities, and we thought those are actually great projects. But the underlying aspect is really that we need to be better at explaining what is our industry to banks and to financial intermediaries. So really trying to explain to them why a budget or accounting sheet will look very badly for any regularly trained bankers, but why it's completely normal in the audiovisual industry. So that was really a point that came out, and someone even mentioned, oh, maybe we need capacity building seminars for producers to help train them on how to convince financiers, or at the same time, maybe we need training for financiers so they get the better understanding about how the audiovisual industry works. We talked also a lot about the AVMS, the Audiovisual Media Services Directive, and the investment obligations that is afforded in the AVMS. It's not an obligation, it's a possibility for each EU member state. And what we thought is there is that trend of starting from nothing into more and more countries adopting a lot of different levels of either levy obligation or investment obligation or a combination of both, or even sometimes a choice. What was quite interesting is that there was also an interest in trying to maybe continue encouraging the development of those investments so that we can have some sort of a level playing field, because the discrepancy between the countries was clearly seen as not problematic, but can be an additional difficulty.
No, it is problematic, if I may. Yes, at least that. That's a very nice EU phrase. It's a challenge, but it's actually a real problem because. For example, investment obligations not only for streamers but also for broadcasters is something that in many European countries is absolutely common. Not only in France, but in many countries. Spain, Italy, many countries. Germany and many other countries, no, it does not exist. So what does that mean? It means that German broadcasters, for example, talking about my country, maybe too much here, but they do not have to invest into German content. So talking about series, for example, which you discussed earlier, you mentioned ZDF, they buy more French series than German series. Why is that? Because they don't have to. That would never happen in other countries. And going back to feature films, it's not too unsimilar. And now that the AVMS directive allows European national governments to establish investment obligations for streamers, which is, of course, a huge tool to make them invest in national productions, or at least local language productions. It means that these things are happening now in Spain, in Italy, in France, maybe in Denmark, I'm not so sure, and more countries. So those countries that are left behind, that will not have the investment obligation passed as a national law to make streamers invest in local content, will have a huge disadvantage over the other, compared to these other countries that have it. So, and there will be many countries that will not have it. We're not so sure in Germany. And whether this includes a particular percentage into feature films or even animation is a whole other question. And so it's actually a real problem. In Germany, no streamer has invested any, has shown any German, or actually no animation show has been produced in Germany for a streamer. Zero. Okay, and Germany is the biggest audiovisual market. And they're investing tons of money into drama series and no animation so far. So that is a problem. How can we make them do that? But please go ahead.
Well, just to echo what you just said, one of the points that we discussed as well is whether those investments should be directed towards specific areas. Should there be some part allocated to animation? We have some countries who have decided, France being one of them, to allocate certain parts, certain percentage of the investment obligation towards specific type of content, whether it's audiovisual, whether it's cinema, whether it's independent or in animation. And that's maybe a consideration within the legal framework that should be considered so that we can have percentage. There was a question also, we have the quota in catalogs, so it's a little bit more for streamers, but when we look at the presence, so there is this 30% obligation of European work in catalogs, and I think the latest studies from the Audiovisual Observatory shows that on average we have around 33% of European content catalog. But if we look only at animation, European animation goes down to 20%, and that's a problem. So there was also the discussion about whether those quotas should be reflected for the animation. That's another problem.
That's right. And one thing we noticed too is, and it was mentioned in the previous panel, there are too many films. So of course there is a big need, and animation plays a big part in culture, in our European culture, and there are many stories to be told. And it's an advantage and a disadvantage. We have a lot of local stories. So local stories are a huge advantage because we have original great stories to tell, but of course they also need to travel and they need to be adapted into an entertaining, ideally entertaining film. And that creates a bit of a challenge. However, I think we all agreed that the budgets need to go up, not only for distribution but also for production. And perhaps fewer films with stronger budgets that can really travel would be of use, while not forgetting and still fostering the cultural sector and giving opportunities to first-time directors. One thing that was mentioned in the group was that on average, first-time directors are above 40 years old in animation, which is very different from real-life action, where you come out of film school, if you're successful, you make your first film and maybe then the second after the school. And in animation that doesn't happen. People go on as artists or short film directors for 15, 20 years before they get a first shot, if they ever get that first shot. And that is also problematic. So it comes back to training professionals and giving more exposure and giving more opportunities to the artists and the filmmakers.
Just coming back on incentivizing the private financing, one of the points that was mentioned as well, which I thought was very interesting, is we need to find a way, more at national level, to also, within the legal framework, create more legal certainty for financiers, so that they have more understanding. So we talked about understanding the industry, but they also have more legal certainty about what it means for them, what kind of money they can recuperate, what kind of guarantees do they have, what kind of certainty they have. So that was a very interesting point. Another aspect that we discussed a lot is distribution. You just mentioned it, distribution and promotion. And it was quite interesting because we started the day yesterday with those figures about how animation films exports well, how most of the admissions are actually being done on a non-national basis. So distribution and promotion was really the first point that came into the conversation, and we all agree that promotion plays an essential part in the success, especially when you're having a film that is going to play in a lot of different countries. So there was a whole discussion about how can we better invest in P&A? How can we better invest in P&A? Can we have more financing? And the idea that you've mentioned about having a European fund for P&A, we didn't go that far, but we looked into having a specific fund for P&A. Can we? Can we? We had some feedback. Some country where they were told that the P&A is actually included in the original budget. In Spain, for instance, there was also discussion about can we actually have some public matching of the P&A budget to really increase the promotion and the visibilities, because that's really a very important point. You need to reach out to your audience, and that led to another discussion, which is probably we need to put more effort into defining our audience. Sometimes for an animation film, just saying family and kids over 10 is not good enough. And so there was also a discussion about how we need to better target, and there are amazing tools now to really do promotion at a very specific level to really make sure that the audience segment that is going to be the most interested, the most likely to go in cinemas and watch the film can be reached, and maybe some investment can be made in that regard. I mean, there was some comparison with the Disney and the big American production who pours a lot of money into it, but also use a lot of technical tools to do that. So there was also a very interesting debate.
Right, so training in the area of marketing, knowing your audiences, and also what we discussed was how can we connect distributors to producers in the early development phase, because it's necessary to have an audience and to develop something that will find its audience. So to get feedback from distributors who might not know much about how to develop a project, that's fine. They don't need to become experts on that. But at least they can give you an idea of, is this something that I believe will find an audience later? And
cartoon movie, no?
Yeah.
Cartoon movie is for that, no?
Yes, cartoon movie, absolutely, yes. It's very good, good platform for that, cartoon movie, cartoon forum for series. But maybe even at an earlier stage, because once you present a cartoon movie, you already have invested some money into a trailer. I mean, you're basically very far along with your development, especially in feature films, and you will already have invested some money. So perhaps focus on higher budgeted films with higher budgeted marketing, and maybe a few fewer films than we have, and have potentially also distribution, public funding for distribution that matches the distributor's investment. So in order to prevent too much public subsidy go into productions that don't really find an audience, why don't the subsidies look at, okay, how much is the distributor investing? Do they really believe in this? And should I match this amount of money with public funds? That was also something we discussed yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think here you have a contradiction, or maybe, a difficult corner. How do you complement, private investment for something that works with, covering all the spectrum of a cultural interest, especially in Europe, which is made up of so many, different kinds of people. That's actually really interesting. I don't know if you have any perspectives on or points.
More and more, public funding articulates with private funding the way Europe Creative Media has done it. Europe Creative Media follows the market. The selection of the application is based on market criteria. How many broadcasters do you have? How much foreign financing do you have? So in that way, public financing and private financing are going in the same direction. This answers also the question about the number of films and series produced. It's better to have public and private financing joining forces on a few good series and films that can be successful, rather than have public financing compensating what the private market did not support.
Right.
More and more it's like that. I'm taking out short movies because this is, as Alfio said once, this is culture or training for young directors.
I think there are also important art house movies that need to be made and that have a cultural value and that don't need to be commercially successful and are still very important to be made. However, we don't have a public funding body that is European to actually help family entertainment or animated commercial films, because we only have media which invests in development and distribution and in the production of series and online content, but not feature films. And we have Eurimage, which focuses very much on art house films and art house animation films, which have very high importance, but basically family entertainment does not happen. And that is a big lack in Europe, I find. There is no European funding body for these kinds of commercial feature films, and they do need funding in order to make these films even stronger and make them cross more borders and be more internationally successful, because we constantly have to compete with the production value of Hollywood films, obviously, something that we all have to do also in real life action, but in animation it's also very apparent, the animation quality. At first sight you see, okay, that looks a little bit cheaper than Pixar, of course. So that's why they need to be art directed very strongly and have their own look, and that costs money also in development to develop that.
Actually, when you're talking about producing animation here in Europe versus in the US, Group 3 worked on the idea that we do lose IPs and we do lose, profits because we work for other people, we as European animators, I mean. Did you come to any conclusion or maybe, I don't know, particular pathway towards not being hired but to own our own, properties?
I'm afraid that when it comes to US streamers, and we know them well. In animation, we've been working with the US players. There were cable and satellite international channels for 25 years. So we know them very well. They are our clients, but they are our competitors. Disney is #1 producer of animation in the world. HBO Max has a studio, Nickelodeon has a studio, Netflix had no studio, but they started a studio in Los Angeles. Okay, they're gonna close it because they understand this is a proper work, this is a job that needs expertise and cost money, but they have this, so they want to own the IP. So only regulation. There is no other answer to that. Only regulation will force them to consider having independent work. That is what we have done in France, and I think they have done that in Italy also. I don't know about Spain, you will tell us. But in France, we said to the government imposed 2/3 of independent production to the streamers with a definition of independent production, which is no copyright, no mandate, and a limitation of the rights term.
Mm-hmm. Cristina, how does it work here in Spain?
We had a huge debate around the definition of independent producer, but in the end we have a definition of independent producer in our law, so 2/3 of the obligations have to be deployed to independent producer works. So we believe in it.
Okay. Yeah. I have another interesting point, I guess, from Group 4. that was, you proposed considering automatic distribution funding by matching the film release budget with public funds. How would it work?
Well, an example is what the CNC in France does for animated series. So what I understand is if you, as a French producer, produce an animated series and you, let's say, get 1 million euros of license fee from whoever, TF1, France Télévisions, then CNC matches that money. So they give you up to around 1 million. It's a bit more complex depending on how much you spend in your country. And if you have something similar where the distributor says, okay, I'm investing 500,000 as a minimum guarantee, I'm investing 1 million as P&A, that's 1.5 million, then a percentage of that could be an automated investment from a funding body. And that would make perfect sense because it's real money. Someone is taking a huge risk of 1.5 million euros because they really believe in this project, so there must be a market potential for that project. And that's for national distribution. Then we also, of course, have the sales agents who need money to promote the film in other countries and in other markets. And they usually also invest some money and a minimum guarantee. That could also be, there could be an automatic trigger to match that money from a public funding body. And so you don't have committees or juries that don't really know and have, bring in their personal taste and are maybe perhaps potentially overwhelmed with making the right decision. If you base it on an automatic system, there is much smaller risk of money being invested in the wrong projects.
In that respect, Media Invest could be a good tool because there are two parts in Media Invest, and one is to guarantee, to back up investment in specific films or series. So what we have to look for is a financial intermediary who will say, okay, I take care of that, I take care of finding 10, 20 wonderful animation films in Europe, and Media Invest will invest 50% of the minimum guarantees and the distributor 50% of that. And we are producers, we are not bankers, and we need a European bank or financial intermediary to do that job for features and series.
Yes, there should be a private funding body being backed by Media Invest, which guarantees part of the risk or takes part of the risk for animation. And so we need to find financial experts, banks, to put that up because there is money to be made with animation, obviously.
I think this is really a great opportunity for the animation sector, to find it.
Does anyone in the audience coming from public funding who has anything to say about this proposal? Because it seems to be quite homogeneous in the approval. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, hi, so Martin from Creative Europe. Well, thanks again for this great conference and the discussion this morning. Well, one comment and one question from my side. Just rewinding a little bit, I was struck by the points concerning how to attract private financing. Because there's an awful lot of discussion about public financing, but that is very finite. And I think you're quite right that a stronger link between production, distribution, and promotion can help make the package more attractive to private investors. Because private investors need to see the logic. You know, how do you go from production to distribution to promotion to audiences and this famous return on investment, therefore. And perhaps that's an area where we can think about how to build that package and present it to private financiers. Concerning Media Invest, I'm not a banker myself. We have delegated this to the European Investment Fund for a good reason. There are various vehicles possible, various permutations, various financial vehicles possible. It's not just one way. There are a number of funds already out there. There are a number of equity funds out there for audiovisual, for creative businesses. The kind of thing you've mentioned today, that's very interesting. It's certainly a possibility. I would suggest that if there is a group of producers that are interested, to contact us, we can be a first port of call, and then to discuss with the EIF to see who are some of the players in the market already that could be interlocutors for you. Because of course creating a new vehicle, a new body, a new platform will take some time. An important thing to think about, of course, is that this is about equity. And so equity is a different animal to lending, very different. And it means opening up your company to some kind of ownership stake by somebody else in one way or another. And again, there are many different permutations possible. But it's something to bear in mind, that you are inviting somebody else to take equity. You're inviting somebody else to come and become, together with you, owner of the company under certain conditions and for certain objectives. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We accept the proposal to have a few producers to discuss with you. And regarding what you said about the equity and company, I'm pretty sure, but we will check, but I'm pretty sure that there are two parts, and one part can be just on minimum guarantee, on investment on each, and anyway, if there is a condition that it is a company, it is always possible to create specific vehicle company for 1, 2, or 3 films and invest in them, so that there is a separation between the production.
You don't want to sell your whole company, right?
Well, it's got value, so. Anyway, thanks for the proposal, Martin. We appreciate.
Yes, thanks.
I have a question that's my curiosity, so please feel free to answer however you want. But whose job is to educate the private sector that animation production is functioning and it's functional and it actually makes money? Who do we have to talk to so that they explain to banks that they have to lend you money?
I take the opportunity. I think it's.
Okay.
I think, well, I talked before about collaboration. I think it's very, very important. In Spain, we just launched a plan to boost our national audiovisual sector. And one of the main issues that we are doing, or the key role that we are playing from the Ministry of Economic Affairs, is just things like that, to make this dialogue possible between the industry and, I don't know, in this case, is financial institutions, so that financial institutions get to know how the audiovisual sector works, and the audiovisual sector knows how they have to talk to financial institutions, because sometimes the language is not the same, and they have to learn each other. So I think that could be a role that could be played by public administration.
So you could do a mano-mano between producers and the ministry. Yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah, I think on a European level, I mean, now that Creative Europe Media invented this Media Invest program for investors to come in and invest private equity, maybe there could also be, it's also a possibility for media to help educate these potential investors about what it is that we do and why our bookkeeping and all that yearly balances look a little bit different from normal businesses, and perhaps build a bridge between investors and the industry.
But we have also to do some homework as producers, because in the past, we have to be honest, some of the producers have probably, by optimism, exaggerated the potential revenues of their films or series. And that is dramatic, because if it works once, it will never work after. So I really warn everybody of you in this room to be rational and to be transparent about what are the revenues flow of your series or films, and don't lie about what you can expect from worldwide revenues or licensing revenues. It's better to build a long-term relationship and don't expect 100% of your production to be financed out of equity.
One of the points that I found interesting when we learned more about Media Invest is that, if I remember correctly, for each of the funds approved by the European Investment Fund, there has to be a film and audiovisual expert who will be there and who will be counseling and advising and really providing that expertise to the fund so that it can really steer and give them the realities. And maybe that idea of having this kind of advisor who has the knowledge and the expertise about the industry to really be that bridge with the intermediaries, financial intermediaries, is really interesting.
Mm-hmm. I mean, for equity investors, there's usually a list of, talking about projections or false projections of world sales companies whose projections they trust, meaning the others they don't trust, because they have been exaggerated in the past. So do I expect 1 million of revenues or 2 million or just 200,000 is something, any world sales company could just give you this sales estimate that might be wrong. And that's why for equity investors it's very important to have it from a company that they trust. And these lists exist, so for good reason.
Regarding, adult-oriented animation, it's been growing in the past years, and I don't know if there's any differences between how can it help to the growth of the industry in television and in the film industry, and how can we help us in some kind of way?
This is a major potential of growth for animation, for sure. It is a reality in the States. It is not a reality in Europe.
It is not?
No, it is not yet. I can probably mention 5 exceptions, but we can't talk about a trend. There is a trend in the US where there are about 100 adult animation series in production, and some of them are very successful with multiple seasons and so on. The money invested by the streamers or the broadcasters on this series is comparable to the money they invest on primetime drama. So we have a few ones produced in France, as you know, as work for hire, such as Arcane, for example. So we know the budget. The budget are roughly for 10.5 hours, it's 20 million. So we were talking about 2 million an half hour, 4 million an hour. So this is huge money. So this is gross. But Europe is not yet there. So I hope it will come. But when we talked about it yesterday, there was one example in Italy mentioned by Alfio, a successful show on Netflix. There was one example or 2 examples at RTBF who mentioned that they were now commissioning short-form series for adults, but it's still exceptional. There are more with features.
Yeah, there are more feature films, definitely. I mean, it's not my expertise, but we also had someone in our group who is more of an expert who gave us a short presentation of that. And they're definitely mostly art house films that are appealing to adults and that are made for adults that are very important. and also culturally important, and there's definitely a trend in Europe towards that. However, we also have to be realistic. I think when we travel to festivals, Annecy or cartoon movie to look at presentations, you see crowds of people going into these presentations and screenings, while in actuality this might not reflect the market value. If I may put it like that, as a family entertainment producer. So yes, there is a market, and yes, there's also a way to make money with these films, absolutely. And they are gaining importance.
Mm-hmm. It happens the same in cinema. When you're a film journalist, as I am, it's like you imagine everyone is interested in the new auteur film that is coming out on screenings, this week. Yeah, well, whatever. I don't know if anyone wants to ask anything or maybe point out something I may have missed, even though you were really fluent.
Maybe I just want to add that even though that was not the main core of our discussion, we did touch upon condition of trades and the importance of keeping IP and the importance for producers to be in control and how fast do they recover the investment. So we didn't go as far as you did in your group, but it was definitely a part of our conversation as well.
And part of that was that, for example, the Spanish participants in our group were not too happy with the fact how distributors in Spain are doing their jobs. So on one hand, it's a bit of a, it seems to be a bit of the paradox. I mean, this was my understanding. I'm not Spanish, so I can say this. No one gets in trouble. And it seems to be a bit of a paradox because on one hand we say we need to support distributors and give them actually more money to release the films. On the other hand, it seems like not all the money ends up in marketing.
Where does it end up? Okay. Please go on.
It's just something I heard. I don't know where it ends up. It seemed like they didn't know where it ended up either.
One of the points that came from that comment was that maybe a little bit more transparency is needed. Yes. And that goes back to your point about we need more data on a lot of different aspects to really be able to understand the different flows, but also the audience and how it works also on digital.
And which includes the idea of producers' corridors, meaning, until the producer recoups any money, as many of us who work in feature film know, the distributor makes back their minimum guarantee that they invested while making a pretty good percentage of every euro that comes in as a profit already, as their sales fee or distribution fee, and then comes the expenses they had for marketing, P&A, while still making those, 35% or whatever as a profit. And only then does the producer see their first euro. And that was very much criticized yesterday in our group. It's good that you brought that up. I had almost forgotten. It's my daily nightmare. And that seems somewhat unfair, so it's important to have producers' corridors, like whatever it is, 5, 8, 10% of every euro that comes in. And here is a producer who's also a distributor, Annemie.
Yes, indeed. That's why I'm coming in.
Of course, of course.
Now, regarding the discussion, where is the marketing money, etc., I think that's very personal. When we are distributing a film, then we sit together with the producer, and he knows exactly what the budget is and and what is spent on what, and it's mutual. If we say we will do an outdoor campaign because we think that's necessary, that's very old-fashioned, but sometimes that still works. Then at least he knows that will cost a ton. It's a lot of money, but at least they're in the discussion. But again, that's very personal. That's how we work, and maybe work otherwise. On the other hand, a distributor puts private money into production. So if it comes to gaining money back again, then if you put 100,000 euros in Belgium, in France it's much more in the territory linked. It's sometimes a huge amount, and it's risk money. Not only the distributor is putting risk money in MGs that is helping the production. He also risks a lot of P&A money. He is helped sometimes by media if the Films on the Move is supported, but sometimes it's 6 months after that you release the movie, so you don't know whether you will be helped or not. You are helped by media to for the P&A, for the minimum guarantee that you pay if it's not the local movie. So there is some support, but on the other hand, there is a lot of private investment for the distributor, and it's a risk. It's sometimes a real risk because sometimes the audience just don't want to see the movie, whether it's a good movie or not.
Yes, and risks need to be rewarded financially, totally understandable. But it's not like producers don't take any risks, right? So producing a show or a movie, that's also a huge risk. And usually you also put in some of your own money or defer some costs. So there has to be a balance. I think that's what the group was asking for, a bit of more of a balance and not be the last to receive any money. I think that was the main point. But and there are also these and those distributors, and obviously you're one of the great ones.
But I think here the challenge is data and metrics, because it's not the same the audience in a linear service than in a VOD service. Maybe your production is being seen in YouTube, so the metric will not be the same. And I think there is no consensus in the sector, so data and metrics, so that you can each other find a balanced solution. So I think that's a very, very important point.
I just want to add that nowadays the distributors are much more vulnerable than like 5 years ago, since as a distributor you had different levels where you could recoup your investment, whereas today as a distributor you can only recoup on theatrical. If that's a disaster, then it's done. Because there is no DVD, and on platforms you don't gain any money. It's just a way of having the film out there. But the ways of gaining money for distributors has really came down.
Yes, the digitalization has not exactly helped theatrical distribution, because that was always a safe thing. You could invest in P&A to release your film in cinemas, and then you knew, well, I would somehow make some money at the end of the day with home entertainment. And nowadays, with streamers being big competitors, that's a major problem. And selling DVDs and Blu-rays brought in a lot more money than digital exploitation so far. We're all hoping for better times. But yes, much appreciated.
I think does anyone have any question? Oh, 2 hands there, okay. There was one on the right. Yeah, there we go.
Thank you very much. My name is Sarita. I'm from Copenhagen, Bombay in Denmark. We're both production, investing, developing, sales and distribution. And I mentioned yesterday, as a distributor, let's say you have a film valued 1 million euros, you will, with 50,000 admissions, sort of recoup in your first window if you are smart. And if you can prove and make deals, business to business, etc. The sales, it will come in the second window, and the producer will be waiting. So, when that's said, we also have an example from last year with a live action, low budget, where we showed a business case to the Growth Fund. It's a fund by the government. And they came in on the first private finance film. And it was very interesting to see how much work. So I agree with you, Philippe. We need to be very careful when we go and reach out for private investors and the government and see how we can combine private and public funding, but we actually managed. But it took 1.5 years to create the models and to show and be very transparent. And it was the same case, so we had to set all the estimates realistic or low. And luckily we accomplished. It's fine. Our investor is still happy. He wants to go on board with a second movie, but we have to be careful, and it takes time to create the numbers. And actually, it was the first time the government did this. So we can improve, and I think we just need to share the knowledge we have, and I think there is combined money to reach out for if we do it right and slowly. But it will take time, and we need to be realistic about recoupment scenarios and the return on investment, and especially to the investors who might be interested. Thank you.
Okay, there was another, yeah, there.
Hi. I was just going back to the last panel, actually. I work for the Norwegian Film Institute, and it's about public financing, because I also work as a representative for Eurymarch. And I just wanted to mention, and I spoke to them before I came here, that there is a pilot program for series coming out this next year. It's a 3-year pilot program. And it's voluntary, so you have to speak to all your national representatives to learn more about it. But it's a top financing that complements the Creative Europe Media funding for series. So I just wanted to mention it because it's something to look out for next year. And the second thing that's going on in Eurymarch is actually the Budapest drama series process, and that is to create a legal framework for series, for co-production of series in Europe. And it's not just animation, but it's series in general. And it's going to hopefully end up in a new convention. You know, we have the convention for co-production of feature films. And it's the same, and it's a long process. It will last until 2025. But it's really important, and we were talking about having a common legal framework to regulate especially the rights situation, and also the percentages of, and what is actually co-production in series is a different question than what it is for feature films, because there we have a framework already. And I also just wanted to say the last thing is, because I used to also be in the media desk, it's really important that you recruit animation professionals to be experts. Because now for Eurymarch and for media, all the experts are external experts, and they are recruited from each country. And if it's really important that people with the knowledge of animation are working as experts in all of these public funds. So that's what I wanted to say.
Okay.
Sorry, it was a little bit out of the panel.
Very interesting. One question in return. Yesterday, I think there was a consensus to say that, unfortunately, the rules of Eurymarch were not appropriate to the co-production of animated movies between West and East, because the Eastern country can't reach the 10% minimum required to be eligible in the co-production with the Western country. Is Eurymarch aware of the problem, or do we need to write a note, or would you kindly express our concern to them?
I will be your, yeah, I'll take it back. And yes, they are aware of this. For any funding body that works all over Europe, we are aware of the different types of levels of the audio.
As a former media desk expert yourself, you can relate, you can tell them that Europe Creative Media does not impose a minimum which allow, for example, me and Zmej to have a co-production between France, Italy and Bulgaria, because there was no minimum required for Bulgaria. Otherwise, it would have been no possible.
Well, the 10% have to do with the European co-production treaty, but the thing is that for animation it's more dramatic than for real-life action, because obviously there are also real-life action co-productions with Eastern Europe, but because the budgets are smaller, the lower, the 10% can somehow be presented, you know, by allocating a lot of the minimum guarantee and things like that to Eastern European, the smaller countries. With animation, where we're working with much bigger budgets, 10% is just too high, and that is a big bummer. You're totally right.
Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to say that, of course, in Creative Europe, we have different point systems to sort of balance out the different sizes of the different industries and countries. But that is also continuous discussion within Creative Europe. how to do that because there are different formats, there are different types of, within the audiovisual industry, so many different types. Some countries are really big on documentaries, some are big on features, and so it's really hard to just say it's low capacity or high capacity. It's an ongoing discussion, I would say, but I think, yeah, they are aware of it, and but I think also it's difficult to have a common legal framework that works for everyone, obviously.
And can you tell more about this Eurimage TV series fund? I understood that animation will be part of it. Can you please confirm? And secondly, how would you see it functioning beside Europe Creative Media, which also supports series?
And, excuse me, since I mentioned earlier that we have a lot of questions, since in feature films, Eurimage, like I said, is very art house oriented, is this going to be the same in series?
Well, we don't know yet. It's going to be a top financing fund, and it's going to be available to the countries that participate in it. It's voluntary participation from every country, and it's going to be rolled out next year for a 3-year test pilot program. But you will be able to, and it will be co-productions, and you have to co-produce with other member countries of Eurimage. But the funding is available for the people who participate in the fund, so it's important to talk to your national authorities. The big difference between the feature film fund is, of course, that is an annual fund. It's not a pilot scheme, but this they have also said that the amount you pay to be part of the pilot program can be partly also funded by broadcasters of your country. So it could be a cooperation to take part in the pilot program for both broadcasters, private or public, in your country, and also your ministry, for example. So that is some of the discussions that you all need to have in with your national representatives. But it's going to be, I think it's going to be announced in Gothenburg or in Berlin, so you will have all the details there.
In Berlin
or
Amsterdam?
Berlin,
February,
yeah.
February. Okay.
Or there will be some information in Gothenburg. I just wanted to mention it because I don't think anyone is here from Secretariat of Eurimage. It's
yeah, absolutely.
And like I said, it's going to be complementary to the Creative Europe funding, which is also a dynamic that has been like that for always, ever since they've existed. And that's why you don't have production funding for feature films, for cinema in Creative Europe, because it's in Europe.
Yeah, maybe just on our side, we've reached out and had a dialogue with Eurimage on this. And what we've also offered is to, whenever the new fund is launched, is to communicate around and organize maybe an online information session and something like that.
Yeah, well, we can already tell that it's Eurimage because announcing a series fund at Berlinale, where there's only feature film people, is a little bit off. But, excuse me? Yes, I know there is a series. I know.
A bigger, yeah, it becomes very big, that series part.
I know there is, but it's still mainly, feature film people.
So, just to conclude, I would like to point out some of the ideas that have been shared along these two tables. I think main points are communication, research, further questions, and yeah, cooperation. I know it's a topic, but I guess, the dialogue that has been established between the audience and the tables, being, part of the tables themselves. So I think it has served for a purpose, and I'm very glad we've had this opportunity and these conversations. So thank you very much. I think it's coffee break time. Oh, that sounds lovely. Thank you very much, and good applause.
of this European Animation Convention. Take your seats. Shut up. Please take your seats. Okay, the last part. First of all, we are going to listen Cristina Morales again, General Director for Audiovisual Regulation. She's going to make a brief explanation about the Spanish tax incentives.
¿Sí? ¿Me podéis oír? ¿Sí, no? Can you hear me? Yeah? Okay. So I will be very, very brief because it's late and we all want to finish and go home, but I will take the opportunity that Mar is giving me to explain you not only the tax incentives regime here in Spain, but also the plan that we have worked very hard, all the public administrations, and we launched 1.5 years ago. And we are right now in the implementation period, working really, really hard with the sector. So the most important thing regarding this plan is that the Spanish government has considered the audiovisual sector as a strategic sector because it has a great potential and favors the economic and cultural development of this country. The plan considers audiovisual sector, the word audiovisual on a very broad, to a very broader extent. So from filming to fiction to animation, visual effects, or even video games. So for us, audiovisual is all of that. So animation is for us as strategic as its features or a TV series. We found that Spain is in a very good position to boost our audiovisual production to become a European audiovisual hub leaders because we have among the leading European countries in terms of deployment of cutting-edge broadband networks and 5G, because we have a great preparation of audiovisual companies to bring in digital technology improvements in the production, direction, and post-production activities, and we have a great talented workforce and also a language spoken by more than 400 million inhabitants around the world. Based on these levers, the plan will boost these advantages to increase the competitiveness of the Spanish industry as well as its internationalization. The plan sets a goal of 30% increase in audiovisual production in Spain by 2025. And to achieve this goal, the plan has established a roadmap with 15 measures based on 4 lines of action. The first axis is devoted to the encouragement and digitalization of our audiovisual activities, promotion, internationalization, and attraction of foreign investment. That is one of our results in this axis, and it has been a centralized information point. So every single investor or company that wants to produce here in Spain, have an activity in the audiovisual sector, can find in this website all the information they need. So we have several sections, and all of them include all the information really on a daily basis actualized. We have it in Spanish, we have it in English, we have it in all our official languages here in Spain. So it's the information that we include in this portal web is based on a collaboration. Therefore, I was very pointed out just this morning on a collaboration between all public administrations and the private sector. So the private associations also include their information here. So it's a very collaborative project. We have also implemented the Spain Audiovisual Bureau, which is a centralized point of contact to accompany investors and companies. So there is a point where when a firm, a company, or an investor has some doubts or doesn't know what to do or what authorization it has to ask for, they have a phone number and an email direction, and in 24, 48 hours, we will try to solve the problem. The second axis of the plan is devoted to the improvement of financial and fiscal instruments, public-private financing instruments, guarantees, and also tax incentives, as I'm going to explain right now. The third axis is devoted to the encouragement and promotion of talent and the development of human capital. Without human resources, the audiovisual sector can do nothing. So we want talented professionals working in our companies. And the fourth axis is devoted to the regulatory reforms and remove of red tape. We are very proud that we published our General Audiovisual Communication Law last in July, transposing the Audiovisual Directive. We are in a process to reform the law on cinema, and we approved an ad hoc administrative procedure to grant authorizations and visas to professionals coming from abroad and working in the audiovisual sector in Spain. And this process has proved to be very, very agile and helped our companies to continue the production even when the pandemic was at its highest level. So I can say that the audiovisual sector did not stop during the pandemic and continued to produce audiovisual content. The implementation of this plan requires a joint work, not only from the public sector, but also for the private one. And we work together in two groups, one in an interministerial group with all the administrations together, and one with the private sector. So we have reached a very narrow dialogue with our private sector, so we know what the companies need. Then we go to the public interministerial group and we try to solve it on a collaborative way, which I can say is working really, really good. Regarding tax incentives, I can say that from a tax point of view, Spain is divided with different territories, applying each territory its own tax regime incentive. So we have mainly mainland territory, we have another system in the Canary Islands, we have another one in the Basque Country, and in the end we have another regime in Navarra. So for mainland territory and the Canary Island we have a tax rebate, cashback, and for Basque Country and Navarra there is a tax credit, and each of the systems has its own conditions. For mainland territory, I will center in mainland, we have a 30% tax rebate of the first million of the deduction base and a 25% of the excess of the deduction base with a cap per project of 10 million euros. But as many of you know, today is being voting in the Parliament a revision of this system, so we hopefully can say tomorrow that the tax incentive regime in Spain will be more competitive for our companies. It's compulsory to produce through a Spanish producer, that should be a tax resident, and the total cost of the production cannot be less than 2 million euros. The deduction base is limited to 80% of the total production's cost. The total tax rebate cannot exceed the 50% of the cost of production, and a minimum cost of 1 million euros must be incurred in Spanish territory. Eligible costs are creative staff expenses provided and expenses derived from the use of technical industries and another suppliers. The credits should include the support of the government of Spain or autonomous communities if they are involved in the financing of the production, film commissions directly involved in the filming, and the specific places of filming in Spain. Regarding the audiovisual press material, the producer must authorize the use of the title of the work and audiovisual press material for the realization of activities and elaboration of promotional materials in Spain and abroad for cultural or tourist purposes, and a cultural certificate is required. So we believe that by now we were very competitive from a fiscal point of view, but we are working very hard, and hopefully tomorrow we can say that we are more competitive than other EU countries regarding a fiscal point of view. So that's all I wanted to point out today, and thank you very much for hearing me.
Thank you, Cristina. Okay, so let's be with the last part, with the conclusion of the conclusions. Let's hear Ivana Genjo and Philippe Alessandri as a representative from Panel 1, Panel 2, Animation in Europe Board, and they are going to tell us what are the conclusions of the conclusions.
Maybe to start with a very brief word on animation in Europe, to encourage those countries who are not part of the federation to join us. We created the federation in 2015 in order to have a dialogue among ourselves and to establish a benchmark of the best practices, but also to have a dialogue with the European institution like Europe Creative Media or Eurimage. We have now 16 members, full members, which are all countries from the EU, and with a nice representation between Eastern Europe and Western Europe, Northern and Southern Europe. We have been involved in the discussion with Europe Creative Media on the reform of the funding system. We organize regularly online meeting with broadcasters. The last one with Netflix was really passionate and really informative, and we will continue having that. So we would very much like to enlarge the circle and have all these other countries who are producing animation to join us. Feel free to talk to either Ivan, Mar, Dirk, myself, or Annemie, or Mohonan, for those who know her. She's not here today. We will be very happy to welcome you, knowing that we have two regular meetings, one in Annecy, one at Cartoon Forum. And now let's talk about the recommendations following the working group, starting with public financing.
Yeah, we have come with these conclusions of the conclusions, and actually we want to convey 3 key ideas or 3 key messages on each of the panels. So on my side, on the public financing, the first key message that we want to convey is to call for a dialogue with EFAT, with the Federation of Film Funds in Europe. So there is a consensus that there's a wide disparity of regulations and opportunities of funding in the different European territories, and that makes the co-production more difficult for producers, and we need those systems to be harmonized. And in order to do that, we need to open this dialogue. So we invite the representatives of EFAT to come to the next edition and to open this conversation with producers to see how we can work together in order to improve the system. That will be the first one. Second message we want to convey is that we need more training, more education training programs for the benefit of both producers and institutions. So we need to train our producers on financing skills, on business plan, on distribution, and we also need to train and to educate institutions, both private and public, so this is film funds, but it's also banking and financial agents, in how animation is produced, how animation is financed, and again, to foster this dialogue so that we can improve relationship within each other. And the last message would be, we need to strengthen the companies and we need to strengthen the projects so the producers keep the IP, the production, intellectual property of the productions. And one of the ways to do that is to strengthen the projects by the first starting point, which is development. So we need to foster, especially on national level, development where in those countries in which development is not part of the financing scheme, so that we can actually get bigger and better projects going into the market. So that would be the three main messages that we want to convey on the public side.
On the private financing, 3 recommendations and messages again. The first one is we need to reinforce the protection of European producers and true European content through the regulation. We know the AMS directive will be revisited in 3 years' time, in 2026, and the European Parliament will start next year to wonder what needs to be changed or added in order to reach the goals. We will ask definition of the European independent production to be included in the IMS directive regarding the mandatory obligations. And we would ask the European content to be strictly defined as one series of film coming from an EU country member, not outside of the EU. That is one regulation. Secondly, to improve the financing of both TV and series, we think we can take advantage of Media Invest program and try to leverage these new public funding in order to get more equity investment into the production of our series and film. We will go to Brussels to the invitation of Martin Dawson in order to prepare a follow-up with the BEI and try to find the right project initiative in order to raise equity financing for animation series and film. The third is less practical but more a message towards all the public institutions for the industry. We believe that with such a fierce competition that we have today, all financing available, market financing and public financing, national, regional, European, have to converge on those series and films which have a chance to break through. Fragmentation of financing will lead to disaster. So we have to converge and make sure that all the financing are going into the same direction, even if at the end of the day this means producing a bit less than we used to produce in the past. These are our messages and recommendations. We look forward for next year's edition to be better, to be more representative of the industry as well. Everybody missed, I guess, private commercial broadcasters and streamers. We will make sure that we can have some of them next year. Thank you to all of you for your attention and participation, creative participation into the workshop. And thank you to Mar and Ivan for organizing the event and all the team.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, Philippe. Can you hear me? Let's listen now to Mr. Edgar Garcia, General Director of ICEC, the Institute of Cultural Companies, Catalan Institute of Cultural Companies, where you want.
Good morning or good afternoon. Yeah, can you hear me? Yes, great. Hi again, it's me again, for those of you who are here with us in the opening. Well, first of all, let me thank you for this excellent summary of the conclusions, of the recommendations, conclusions, whatever. I'm mainly struck by that one about convergence of all types of financing addressed towards winning projects, so to say, yeah? Quite a challenge. If that might ever happen in all senses, yeah, in any sector, that would be, I thought that was, for me personally, one of the most challenging conclusions. In any case, these conclusions and all the debates and ideas that have come up during Animar emphasize the importance of this meeting for the animation sector in our country as well as in Europe. We believe that the Congress has been a unique opportunity to focus on some of the financial issues that are currently at stake at the European level and the animation sector. And I hope it has also served to stimulate synergies and boost collaboration amongst the key players of the sector which have gathered here in Barcelona for these 2 days. Organizing a convention like this is not possible without the participation of many actors under the leading role of PROA. As the director of the Catalan Institute for the Cultural Companies, I'd like to say we are delighted to have contributed to the celebration of this convention, Animar, and would like to express our commitment to guarantee the support for PROA so that Animar may celebrate in the following editions in Barcelona. So that would be the main statement that I'm pretty sure that we share with IFEX and we'll go on supporting this. In fact, I would dare say that the convention has been possible thanks to a long-lasting, intense dialogue with PROA and the whole of the animation and audiovisual sector, a conversation we are determined to keep under any circumstance, and we used to do not only with the animation sector and audiovisual, but with the rest of the sectors under our competence. As a public agency, we at ICEC are attentive to the needs of the sector. We listen to the demands of the sector, as Cristina was also mentioning from the state government. We promote the development of new projects along the whole of the visual value chain. We help the sector by living up to their needs and expectations. And I'm proud to say that I believe, and we believe, this is one of the signs of identity of our institution. If you allow me to say, dialogue and attention to the needs of the sector are part of our DNA. It's not only about us, of course, but what concerns the Catalan animation sector, we're fully convinced that there is a potential for innovation. It should aim, it's true, to explain itself better sometimes so that everyone can understand it is a highly innovative environment. This is one of the challenges for the future, and we're committed to fulfilling it, both with our funds and also with European funds, yet not only through public investment. Picking up on yesterday's words by Martin Dawson about guarantee facility by EIF and other tools which are there available, and we are not always sure that they are really fully used. So the public administrations need to guarantee the access to private investment by putting into place a stable regulatory framework that generates confidence and security, and that also promotes the private investment in the audiovisual animation sector as an opportunity for economic growth. And moreover, because the last step of the value chain is always the audience, we believe it is our responsibility to allocate funds for the development of audiences for the visual and animation. And for the Catalan sector, we need to increase our efforts in order to create a powerful brand image for our audiovisual sector that allows for its international dissemination. I think in that aspect we are also a step ahead. We have a key advantage let's say we believe that in Catalonia it is, and it's about qualification and talent of Catalan professionals working in the field of animation, which has been lately, if not only lately, but also lately internationally recognized. Like we have two companies, Goldby and Peekaboo, who were awarded and recognized the last Cartoon Forum. as well as many other long feature film productions at film festivals around the world. I know I'm being a bit long, but I have a piece of news for those of you who've never heard that. So I would like to say a few words about a cornerstone project for the government, which is in the near future of the audiovisual and digital sector. We call it the Catalunya Media City. Catalunya, it's Catalonia in Catalan. So Catalunya Media City is a project we've been working with the private sector, and that will indeed, we believe and we hope, be, driving point and revolutionary. Catalunya Media City is to develop into a physical venue around Barcelona in a space very well known for us, which is Les Tres Xemeneies, 3 big chimneys from an old infrastructure. And we will provide this infrastructure, but also the environment, as it has been designed and as the place where the future as the place where the future of visual contents will be shaped. We are talking about a research and production center where innovation, education, testing, and services will be at hand for the industry. The Catalunya Media City will be a 130,000 square meters creative hub, only 10 minutes away from Barcelona city center, open to the world and equipped with the latest technologies and facilities. An infrastructure with the audiovisual industry, but also all those creative industries needing from audiovisual content, like gaming industry, digital sector, media sector, and others, will be able to work together using the most cutting-edge solutions for remote, virtual, and distributed audiovisual production through a centralized technological structure. So this is for us a mid-term project that we expect that has been already announced, at local media. And we expect the Catalunya Media City will fulfill the needs of audiovisual content creators and industry, and will put Catalonia on the map. We will obviously be delighted to share with you all the details of concerning this project in the near future, maybe on the next edition of Animar Barcelona. So thanks for your attention, and we'll be glad to probably next year talk more about this project. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yeah? Thank you, Edgar. Please, Pablo, take the floor. Pablo Conde is the director of Fashion, Habitat and Cultural Industry at ICEC, Spain Trade and Invest.
So after Edgar, I'll try to be shortly. I'm the other sponsor of the event. From the beginning, we were behind the event because we believe that yesterday we were talking about big countries, small countries in Europe, and you were all saying that, oh, you don't have to say anything because Spain is a big country. We are still small worldwide. So we are the trade promotion agency here in Spain, and we are the one responsible for having all the pavilions, either an ANSI or Cartoon Forum and the Spanish delegation, and we are small. So we have to work together. We have to work in the European way. We have a lot of things to look forward, and that's why we are committing to Animar Barcelona for the next years, because we believe that the audiovisual sector is very important, is a strategic pillar of the government, of the Spanish government, and therefore we should still be working together in ANSI, MIFA, in all those places, in all those markets, to reach better possibilities in order to be able not to talk about Hollywood, that's something that is impossible, that nothing has been available and reached. We have many examples of Oscar winners. Edgar was talking about putting Catalonia in the map. Catalonia won the Oscar, won the Berlinale with the Golden Bear with Alcaraz, so I believe European actors are doing pretty well outside. We have to believe in ourselves, and we have to believe in the European project, and Media Creative, Europe Creative is doing very good things, but we have to help them from the local governments and also from the private sector. And I believe, and from ICEC, we believe that we have huge opportunities, and we have to work together in order to develop them. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoy Animar Barcelona. And I think now it's Jordi time, no? Or it's show time? Ivan, it's your time, Ivan. Okay.
Hello, it's me again, but I'm the last one, so I'll be quick. No, I'm just here to share a couple of secrets. Last night, when we were heading back in the shuttle to the hotel, and Philippe and I were talking, and he was saying like, "Oh man, we were so comfortable at home just managing our companies. Why on earth do we get into this trouble organizing these kind of things?" And I was saying like, well, just because we don't know how to do our work wrong, and this is part of our work as producers. So if we actually want to perform well in our companies and our productions to be successful, we need to foster this dialogue with the rest of the industry, with the policymakers, with institutions. So this is part of our work, and that's why we are here. And let me also tell you, for ones that you don't know, I'm president of ProAnimates, regional level. I'm vice president of PROA and of DBUS, national level, and I'm vice chairman in animation in Europe, European level. So I'm on the 3 levels of discussions. And that's the second secret to share. Whenever there is a discussion, it's always the same kind of discussions. In the 3 levels, I am hearing always the same kind of problems. So this is a proof that all of us around Europe, we face the same problems, so we need to find common solutions in order to be stronger enough and to compete to those who are outside of the European borders. And so that's why I'm here, why we are organizing these kind of forums, to foster the dialogue, to receive all the ideas from the different agents in the market. And so thank you for your contributions. Thank you for your participation in the working groups. This is just the beginning. We will come back. We will strike back next year in a bigger and better event. So you are all more than invited to Barcelona in 2023. Thank you very much.